With the authority of the Council, I shall now confer the degree of Doctor of the University. I call upon the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Roy Webb, to make the presentation.
Chancellor, the Council of the University has resolved to award the degree of Doctor of the University to Dr. David Suzuki. David Suzuki was born in Vancouver, Canada on 24 March 1936 and educated at the London Central Collegiate Institute in Ontario. He received a BA in Biology from Amherst College, Massachusetts in 1958 and a PhD in Zoology from the University of Chicago in 1961. In the following years, he undertook postdoctoral studies in Colorado and Tennessee. David Suzuki's distinguished career as an academic began with his appointment as an assistant professor at the Department of Genetics, University of Alberta in 1962. Further appointments at the University of British Columbia, Vancouver followed, culminating in his appointment as Professor, Department of Zoology in 1969. His association with the University of British Columbia has continued to this day, most recently through his work as an associate with the Sustainable Development Research Institute. David Suzuki's significant achievements in research were recognised early in his career, receiving the E.W.R. Stacey Memorial Fellowship Award 1969-1972 for the most outstanding Canadian research scientist under the age of 35. His most acclaimed research concerned the study of the fruit fly, Drosophila, particularly the genetic control of chromosomes and cell division, the genetic regulation of development, the molecular organisation of genes and chromosomes, and the genetic control of behaviour. He participated in a number of exchange programs, including a National Research Council scientist exchange with France in 1969, the USSR in 1973, and as the NATO Research Fellow in West Germany in 1974. He has represented Canada as a delegate at numerous international congresses on genetics and participated in an exchange program to the People's Republic of China in 1982. Through his work as broadcaster, journalist and writer, David Suzuki has established himself as one of the world's foremost experts on the environment over the last 30 years. He is the author of 23 books, including Inventing the Future, The Wisdom of the Elders, and Time to Change. These works examine the topical areas of Indigenous peoples, politics, science, spirituality and technology, and their links to our living world. A passionate advocate of environmental protection, he is committed to the preservation of things on which human survival depends: our air, water, soil, and biodiversity. The spirit and eloquence of his environmental message has inspired a generation of conservationists. A charismatic and articulate communicator, David Suzuki has worked tirelessly to increase the public's understanding of science. He has hosted a number of television series, specials, documentaries and children's programs, including the award-winning Canadian television series The Nature of Things and Our Planet for the Taking. He has also been involved in a range of radio programs, including Quirks and Quarks, David Suzuki's Discovery, and It's a Matter of Survival. David Suzuki's vision and leadership were instrumental in establishing the David Suzuki Foundation, a federally registered Canadian charity with a mission to discover, support and promote sustainable development. The Foundation is involved with projects such as the Social Change Conference, the Climate Change Project, and the Kaiapó Research Station in the heart of Brazil's Amazon rainforest. During his career, David Suzuki's achievements have been recognised by a number of prestigious appointments and by numerous national and international awards. He was President of the Canadian Society of Cell Biology from 1969 to 1970, Associate Editor of Genetics from 1976 to 1978, and Director of the Canadian Civil Liberties Association from 1982 to 1987. Many honours have been bestowed upon him, including the Canadian Human Rights Foundation Award in 1975, the Canadian Medical Association Medal of Honour in 1984, the Governor-General's Award for Conservation in 1985, and the Royal Bank Award in 1986. Eminent international bodies have also paid tribute to his efforts by awarding him the UNESCO's Kalinga Prize for Science and the United Nations Environment Programme Medal. David Suzuki was made an officer of the Order of Canada in 1976 and was a recipient of the Order of British Columbia in 1995. It is especially fitting that the Council of Griffith University should honour David Suzuki in recognition of his distinguished contributions to science and to the international community. Chancellor, it is with great pleasure that I present to you David Suzuki for admission to the degree of Doctor of the University.
I now call upon Dr. David Suzuki, Doctor of the University, to deliver the occasional address.
My fellow graduates, proud parents and friends, faculty and distinguished members of the platform here. First of all, thank you very much for the great honor you've bestowed on me. But congratulations to all of you who so richly deserve this recognition, the degree today. You must be justifiably very proud, and I salute you for completing your studies here. With your permission, I'd like to address my remarks primarily at the graduates here today. Once every 50 generations, a special moment arrives when we experience a transition, a fundamental transition from one millennium to the next. You are part of the generation that will undergo that transition. You will spend the bulk of the rest of your lives in the third millennium, in the 21st century, a time of unprecedented challenges and opportunities. I'm a biologist, and by training, my biology background encourages me to look back over long periods of evolutionary time. And I view things over that vast expanse, looking back over the 2 million odd years of evolution from our hominid ancestors. You have to say that we human beings have come a very long way in that time. For 99.9% of our history on this planet, we lived in small family groups of nomadic hunter-gatherers. We were very few in number. We had a light ecological footprint. Nature, for most of our existence on Earth, was vast, was endlessly self-renewing and generously abundant. At the dawn of human consciousness, our species lived in a world assaulted by cosmic forces far beyond our comprehension. But the human brain had a genetic need, an innate need to create order out of this chaos. And we painstakingly, over generations, accumulated a profound knowledge base built on our observation, on experience, on experimentation and conjecture. Our distant ancestors recognized that there were regularities in nature. There were patterns that repeated themselves, cycles of day following night following day, the seasons that came and went, the lunar cycles, the movement of the stars across the heavens, the movement of animals at different times of the year, the succession of plants through the seasons. Those cycles gave us a sense that if we could understand them and predict them, we would have some semblance of control over the great cosmic forces that shaped our lives. And what they gave us was a sense of a future over which we had some measure of control. Because by looking ahead and understanding the regularities in nature, we, above all other creatures, had a special ability to choose, to deliberately choose our path into the future. And so human beings long ago began to construct what anthropologists call a worldview. And in a worldview, everything that we know, everything that we see, everything that shares our place with us is all a part of that worldview and all deeply connected. Nothing exists in isolation. In a worldview, the stars, the clouds, the mountains, the forests, the fish, and the birds are all a part of that world and are intimately connected to us. The past, the present, and the future are not distinct times. They are a continuum that are all interlinked. And in such a worldview, human beings understood that they had enormous responsibilities. As part of that complete system, they had the responsibility to do things the right way, to make sure that it continued. Because if they didn't do the right things, it would shatter that world, and there would be enormous consequences. So we needed to practice our rituals, our traditions, our ceremonies. We had to respect our sacred places in order to keep everything on track. And in a worldview, our elders represented the repository of tremendous experience and history and wisdom, and they were absolutely vital to each succeeding generation. Now suddenly in this century, in your lifetimes especially, we human beings have exploded on the global scene. We have become a species unlike any other that has existed on this planet. We are now the most numerous large mammal on Earth, and we are spread everywhere. Our technological power, our consumptive demand, are changing the atmosphere, the oceans, the soil, and the diversity of life that is the basis of the planet's productivity. To get an idea of how rapid the change has been in this century, when I was born in 1936, there was no television anywhere on Earth. My parents didn't have to worry about me watching too much as I worry about my children. When I was born, every year, hundreds of thousands of people died of smallpox every year, and millions were left with terrible scars all over their body. Hasn't been a case of smallpox for over 15 years. It's extinct. When I was a young child, my parents wouldn't let me go to movies in the summer or to swim in public pools because they were terrified I would get polio. Most youngsters today don't even know what polio is because it's carefully controlled. When I was a child, when I was born, there were no computers, no compact discs, no transoceanic phone calls, no satellites, no pills, no birth control pills, no genetic engineering, no microwave ovens or crazy glue. These and many more things have become a part of our daily lives since I was born. The world that you take for granted is fundamentally different from the one that I knew as a boy. Throughout history, people drew on the insights, the knowledge accumulated over time and experience. The wisdom and memories of our elders were crucial for guiding coming generations into the future. That relationship between the generations has been profoundly altered in my lifetime. Since the 1950s, the rate of technological change has accelerated, and as each new technology, and some of the ones that I recounted, have become widespread, society changes and renders the way life was before that technology obsolete and ultimately extinct. There is little knowledge or past experience to guide us into a world of the internet and virtual reality, a world of genetic engineering and cloning, of ozone depletion and global warming. When they become dominant realities, the knowledge of our elders becomes obsolete. Our worldviews have been shattered by technological change, by the information explosion, by our greater mobility as communities and families break down, by the economic disconnection from the real world, by government priorities and bureaucratic subdivisions. The planet is now being monocultured by television and the message to consume the planet up. The planet is being monocultured by the kind of vision that's epitomized. Here I am way down here in Australia. I turn on the TV and there's good old CNN from Atlanta. CNN purports to be world news. It is not world news. It's the world as seen through American eyes. And that worldview, that view of the world is being communicated and rammed down the throats of people all around the world. We are being monocultured by a single notion of development and progress, by global markets and transnational corporations. Those great repetitious rhythms of nature on which our ancestors depended and built their worldviews are no longer as dependable. The web of life is being depleted by the loss of 50,000 species a year. The atmosphere is changing. The soil is eroding. The oceans are being depleted. After the greatest gathering of heads of state ever in human history in 1992 in Rio, it was supposed to signal a fundamental shift in the way that we do everything. Last month I was back in Rio at a meeting called Rio +5, 5 years after that momentous event, to assess what has taken place since the year summit in 1992. And the conclusions there was that governments and the private sector have failed to act on the promises and agreements made in 1992. These are the enormous challenges that you face, challenges that my generation has bequeathed upon you. And I hope that your university education has conferred upon you the greatest gift that anyone of your age could receive at this time. A critical mind, now filled with important information, a mind that is capable of probing the flood of information that is now washing over us. As you question many of the assertions being pressed upon you, you must now seek to rediscover the threads of connection that tie the world together. As a biologist, I believe it is most obvious that these connections are most obvious when we reflect on what we are as biological beings, as we recognize the most precious basic needs that we all have. I remind you that when a child leaves a mother's body at the moment of birth, the first thing that child needs is air. The breath of air the child takes is its moment of announcement that it has arrived and it is alive. And from that first breath a child takes, it will require 20 to 80 breaths a minute until the last gasp on that person's deathbed. Air is not a vacuum or empty space. Air is a physical substance that binds each of us together. We like to think of the rugged individualist walking tall and free. We're not at all. You and I are linked together in a matrix of air. The air that I take deep into the most warm, moist, and intimate parts of my body, when I breathe out, immediately comes out of my nose and rushes straight up yours. What you are doing with every breath is to absorb atoms and molecules that were once an intimate part of my body. And in the time that I've been privileged to stay in this room with you, every one of you now has atoms that were once a part of every one of us in this room. We all have atoms that were once a part of every one of you. And I've now been in Brisbane for 2 days. I have atoms that are built into my body from every human being living in the city of Brisbane. And they, in turn, have atoms coming from mine. We are linked in this matrix, this sacred substance of air. And you and I, if you're as old as I am, we have atoms in us that are not only made up, that came once from birds and snakes and spiders and trees. We elders are made up of atoms that were once a part of Joan of Arc and Jesus Christ. Because air isn't made by some wonderful machine. The air that's here is always here and is being borrowed temporarily and returned back. Air is a substance that no technology can ever reproduce. Air is this substance that is a gift of the earth and life on it. And it's the same as well as biological beings. We are absolutely dependent on water, a sacred substance. There isn't a water generating machine. Water is always here, and water simply evaporates, rains, and cartwheels around the earth. Every one of us is at least 60% water by weight. We're basically a big blob of water with some thickener added to keep us from drifting away. And all of those gazillions of molecules of water have come from all of the oceans of the world. They have evaporated off the rainforests of Brazil and Papua New Guinea. You and I are linked as well by that fundamental glue of water that ties all of life together. Every bit of the nutrition that we consume, however packaged it may be, was once alive. Children are often shocked to realize that food was once living. It's the most intimate relationship that we can have with another being, even more intimate than with your lover. Because not only do you take it into your mouth, you actually take the substance of another being and make it into yourself. You and I are basically compost heaps for the molecules for other living organisms. We are made up of other life forms, and those life forms then bind us to the earth. And when you think about the life that sustains us, that makes us up, you remember the scene out of Jurassic Park with the mosquito embedded in amber. The amazing thing about that mosquito was not that it had DNA that came from dinosaurs. Oh, I mean, that was nice. But to me, what made that scene so remarkable was that if a molecular biologist took the DNA out of that ancient mosquito and the DNA out of its gut from the dinosaur and looked at the genes in it, you would find genes in those DNA pieces that were identical to DNA in you and me. And what they show is that we are related to all other life forms on this planet by our evolutionary history. They are our kin. They're not resources or commodities. Other life are our relatives. And surely those relatives that nourish us, that keep us alive, that keep the atmosphere clean and the water pure, surely we treat our relatives with greater respect than we would treat resources. As we reflect on our biological nature, we have no way of avoiding the conclusion that we are deeply embedded in the natural world and completely dependent on the services that they perform for us in yielding clean air, clean water, clean soil, and the food we eat. As we enter the next millennium, our reconnection with, our reinsertion into, our reenchantment of the natural world will enable us to work, I believe, on a truly sustainable future. And that is the challenge for you, is to rediscover those ties and the fact that we live in a worldview in which everything is interconnected. It's a great challenge, but I have confidence that you can do it. Congratulations and good luck.